University of Ghana. Professor Quartey, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning to your colleague in studio. Good morning to the returning listeners.
Look at it from, this point. We've seen the rate of inflation from 11.5 to 9.4%. And the question really is, okay, and so what? What does this mean, Professor Quartey?
Well, it means prices are increasing, but not increasing so speedily like it used to be. So the rate of change in prices is now 9.4 compared to 11.5 the previous year. But I must say that we can credit this to our fiscal prudence. We can credit this to particularly the IMF program. When you sign on to a program and you respect the standards of the program, then certainly you are likely to see some of these gains happening. And I wish we will learn from this so that even when we exit from the IMF program, we'll continue to be disciplined as a nation. But one point I want to point out is that in as much as inflation is reducing, I'm concerned about the regional disparities, particularly the poor regions. The northeastern region, for instance, you find part of the northern region as well, very high rate of inflation compared to a place like Bono East and others. You can tell that where the food basket is, where food production is really on the increase, inflation is much lower compared to the regions where we are not witnessing high rate of food production. And it worries me because when livelihoods are threatened, when people's livelihoods are threatened, it certainly affects the way they behave. It can even generate into conflict. And therefore, policies should be directed towards reviving or supporting such areas to ramp up their food production to enhance their livelihood.
And talking about the regional inflation, I see Bono East, for instance, 1.2%. That is very low compared to, say, a place like Northeast, that is 20.1%, and in the Greater Accra region, 7.7%. This should give us an indication of where we should direct policy to, for instance. So, based on this, what do you say we do in the regions that have higher inflation?
Yeah, so food plays a very critical part in fighting inflation, because inflation is basically more money chasing few goods. And therefore, if you want to address it, either you reduce the amount of money in circulation or enhance the production of goods and services, or do both, basically, depending on how you want to tackle inflation. Therefore, we have to enhance food production within the areas where we are reporting very high rates of inflation. And I think the challenge with that is we are not investing much into irrigation. Irrigated agriculture land, for instance, is less than 5%. And I think we have to move away from that, given the climate change challenges we are facing currently. Otherwise, if we can continue to rely on rain-fed agriculture, it's not sustainable, and we'll be witnessing such high rate of inflation in certain parts of the country. And that, for me, is a source of worry. Once our livelihood are threatened, already we are faced with illegal mining, where agricultural lands are being converted, are being poisoned, our water bodies are being poisoned, and therefore our food basket is threatened. So if we don't do something now, it will get to a point where we have to import our food. Already, look at the rate of inflation for imported and locally produced food. Imported food, the rate of inflation is 8.7%. Locally produced is 12.2%. It tells you the inefficiency in our production. It tells you our cost of production of local goods are higher than when we import them. No wonder we are always importing, and our exchange rate is always challenged.
That's a great point you make there. And so you're saying we have to find a way of reducing the locally produced items, or where the rate of inflation for August it was 12.2, in September 10.1, but imported items from 9.5 in August to 7.4 in September. I always like it when we know, okay, so what do? You say we should look at that. That's something we'll come to, later on. But you talked about the fiscal prudence and the IMF program. Help us understand, what are we doing differently now to actually take us to where we are today?
Yes, so if you look at the IMF program, the triggers are clearly stated. Your expenditure threshold, your budget deficit, how much deficit you should run. And you see that there is a push to enhance revenue mobilization, and then also a handle on our debt GDP, so that we don't borrow and find ourselves not being able to pay. There are other policies to inject efficiency in revenue mobilization, efficiency in the energy sector, and many other things that you find under the program. I believe after going through such a program, all the reviews, there are lessons to be learned, lessons to encourage efficiency, which I think the GRA is doing, and I hope they can speed up that process so that we are able to mobilize more resources domestically than we do currently. We also have to inject efficiency in our spending. Gift-made system. Oftentimes we hear about the gift-made system where all expenditures from the MMDAs will be tracked, etc. Unfortunately, we still continue to record off-budget spending, all kinds of spending that do not pass through the gift-made system. I hope the Minister of Finance will stick to his word and track the rate so that we will be able to track expenditures and ensure that we are prudent with our spending. We are able to monitor spending. We are able to ensure value for money. Unless we do that, we can raise all the revenue that we can, but a lot of them will go into waste. There's too much inefficiency in our spending. There's too much waste in our system. So these are the things we have to do under the IMF program, and I believe we should learn. We have been to the IMF for 17 times, and I think by now we should have learned the good lessons and be able to be independent in managing our economy.
Great. But Professor Quartey, before we go, I know you have a meeting, so before we wrap it all up, we've the original target was not to achieve a single-digit inflation this year. We've achieved it now. Based on your analysis, does it look like we'll go down further before the end of the year?
Well, the last quarter of every year, inflation tends to be slightly higher than you find in the first 2 quarters or so. So I don't expect us to deviate too much from what we have currently. But then we also have to have throw in this portion. Some level of inflation is good. If you continue to reduce expenditure, a government doesn't spend, you fighting inflation at the expense of your infrastructure, you're fighting inflation at the expense of jobs, you would be found wanting. Some level of inflation is good. There has been estimates about optimal rate of inflation. Some have put it at between 10 to 12 or 15% for a developing country like ours. So in as much as a lower rate of inflation is good, too much attention to reduce inflation below a certain threshold will not augur well for a developing country because we need to develop. We need to pump money into infrastructure. We need to pump money into irrigation. So let's strike a delicate balance and get an optimal rate of inflation.
Winston, I was just going to ask Prof about food inflation as well. The reason why we don't see a corresponding decline as well each time we have this headline or significant drop. You take a look at the headline drop, it's somewhere around 14.4% as the government statistician is telling us. But you compare that to what's happening to food, it's dropped down to 11% as compared to 14.4, I believe, as of September last year. So why don't we constantly have, that corresponding drop also in food inflation?
Yeah, so it goes back to my point about the need to do more commercial farming, the need to do more irrigated agriculture. We are not producing as much as we could. We are not, and even where we enhance production, we don't store them. We are not able to add value. So when we are in season, you find tomato in abundance, you find other food products in abundance. Off season, then inflation tends to escalate. So we have to have proper processing, storage of some of the food products. Our cost of production, as I mentioned, locally produced, is also high compared to imported products. It means we are inefficient in our production. We need to inject some efficiency in our production to ensure that our cost becomes comparable with what pertains in other countries. That is why we find our farmers going to Burkina Faso to bring in tomato, to bring in onions, etc.
All right, Professor Peter Quartey, thank you very, very much for joining us this morning. Please enjoy the rest of your day.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Great. Blessed. So there you have it, Professor Peter Quartey joining us. But look, I've been looking at the data, and Blessed, I think I should just share this with you. Now, the lowest region, the region with the lowest inflation is the Bono East region. Watch this. The rate of inflation was 6.1% in August. Then it reduces to 1.2%. But in the Northeast region, from 15.1 to 20.1%. So you would ask, what is causing the Northeast region?
Yeah.
I'll share with you, the drivers of inflation. But before that, if you go to the Northeast region, so it says disaggregation of food and non-food inflation in the Northeast region. Now, if you look at, say, fish and other seafood, the rate of inflation is 116%. Okay? When it gets to, say, tea and other plant products for infusion, 107%. Coffee and coffee substitutes, 80%. Fruits and nuts, 54%. Milk and other dairy products and egg, 45%. Live animals, meat and other parts of slaughtered animals, 39%. Vegetables, tubers, plantain, cooking bananas and pulses, 10.9%. Fruit and vegetable juices, 10.1%. When it comes to sugar and desserts, is minus 5.2. Ready-made food and other food products, minus 8.3. Oils and fats, minus 9.0. Cereals and cereal product, minus 18.9. But this is it when it comes to non-food inflation. Mobile communication services, let's pay attention.
Yeah.
307%.
Wow.
So we need to find out what could be causing all of these things.
Yeah.
Then you have parts and accessories for personal transport equipment, 122, garments 118, medicine 112, solid fuel 95, shoes and other footwear 94, tertiary education 91. Okay?
Yeah.
So this is the issue if you go to the Northeast region. But if you go to, say, the top 20 contributors to inflation, you're looking at herrings, smoked, 23%.
It's always high.
Vegetable oil, 50%. Charcoal,
Yeah.
43.8%.
Wow.
So we need to check that. Ginger is 113.8%. Electricity, 36.4%. When it comes to onions, 33%. And then there's one that shocked me. English textbook, 15.4%.
Wow.
So these are the key contributors. So these are things that you have to look at. So you know where the increases are.
Yeah.
What do you do? And it's obvious we know what we can do. We know what we can do. For instance, okay, this whole bit about how do you call it? Herrings and all of that. We know what we can do. We know the things that we can do. Why the increase in the price of herrings, for instance? Why are certain foods in short supply around this time? And so once they're in short supply, it means that we have to pay more for it. What can we do to ensure that we have all year farming? And these are things we've talked about. So I'm happy that, these days it's not just like the past, then we just put out the figures and said, this is what we've achieved, and end of story. We're actually directing areas that government should focus on. So, the Minister of Food and Agriculture, please focus on these things.
Areas, yeah.
Okay, all the things about Feed Ghana, the Kunkokon Kitinkiti initiative and everything. Let's make sure. Because if you look at, I just looked at, for instance, refuse disposal, the rate of inflation, for 2020, for September is 25.7%. Okay, that of yam in August it was 23.8, but in September it is 11.8%. So the rate of increase is going down.
Right.